So this whole class is basically going to be split up into 3 parts, and these are the 3 key steps of effective studying, effective learning, effective anything. And that is step 1, understand, step 2, remember, and step 3, focus. And they're all kind of interlinked, and obviously kind of focusing is part of the understanding and remembering, but those are the 3 broad categories that we split up this class into. And when it comes to effective studying of any kind, understanding is by far the most important thing. I think one of the mistakes that we can often make when we're studying for our exams or learning anything new is that we can be very quick to rely on memorization. And especially when we talk about some of the effective study techniques that we'll talk about later on, like active recall and spaced repetition, especially when students find out about those for the first time. And this certainly happened for me. It's very easy to just go into kind of flashcard making mode and thinking, okay, cool, I'm just going to be doing efficient things now, and just kind of really focusing on memorizing the details. But that's the wrong way around to do it. We always want to be starting with understanding. Once we understand the stuff, once we can comfortably explain it to a friend, comfortably explain it to a 5-year-old, and we can actually remember the fact that we've understood it, at that point, everything just becomes so much easier. So step 1 is understanding, and within understanding, we'll talk about the Feynman method, we'll talk about active recall and how it works, we'll talk about some of the evidence behind it, and we'll talk about how you can take notes during class and how you can take notes after class to aid with our understanding of stuff. And then we'll talk about scoping the subject, which is another fundamental technique to help understand the content. Our second step is remembering. And we've all had this issue where, we think we've understood something, we've been kind of working through it for hours and hours, and then we come back to the topic a week later and we realize that, oh crap, I literally can't remember anything that I definitely understood like a week ago. And that's because of the way memory works. There's something called the forgetting curve, which we'll talk a lot more about later on. But that's basically this phenomenon where anything we learn, we are just gonna, forget exponentially. It'll exponentially decay from our memory, sort of like Half-Life if you're into A-level chemistry and stuff. Our memory for that thing will decay over time, and we have to interrupt the forgetting curve by repeating the subject at spaced intervals, and that's where the idea of spaced repetition comes from. And so in this class, we'll be talking through loads of techniques on how we can efficiently remember stuff. So things like using spaced repetition, using a retrospective revision timetable, using a spaced repetition journal, using flashcards, using mind maps, highlighting, rereading, memory palaces, the PEG technique, mnemonics. There's all sorts of evidence-based techniques that we can use to help remember stuff more efficiently. But again, just to reiterate, the main important thing is that we understand the content first, and we worry about memorizing or remembering it later. And finally, along with understanding and remembering, the third part of effective studying, effective learning, effective doing anything is being able to focus. So firstly, this comes from getting the motivation or the discipline to actually sit down and study in the first place. That's something we all struggle with. Then it comes from when we're actually sitting down to study, how do we not get distracted? How do we make sure we can focus for an extended period of time? How do we take breaks appropriately? And so in this class, we'll be talking through loads of techniques on how we can more efficiently focus using some evidence-based examples and also some anecdotal examples from my own life and that of my friends. We'll talk about kind of what music is best to help studying and focusing, and we'll talk about the different environments that we can create for ourselves to help make the process of studying a little bit more pleasurable and therefore make us more likely to do it. So those were kind of the 3 steps of effective studying. Step 1, understand. Step 2, remember. And step 3, focus. And we're going to be diving into those in great anal levels of detail throughout this entire class. Don't feel like you have to watch all the videos. I think hopefully you'll find it helpful, and everything we've put in here, we've put in there because hopefully it's useful. But if you are kind of well versed in the study techniques and you've been watching my YouTube videos for the last 3 years, then maybe you can skip the video on active recall or on spaced repetition, because these are things you'll be very familiar with. Or you can just watch them anyway because it'll be a good reminder. But there's lots of stuff in this class that I haven't talked about in YouTube videos before. Things like different mnemonic techniques, things like, motivation, focus, procrastination, consistency, all of this sort of stuff is brand new to this class. And finally, if you haven't read a book called Make It Stick, you should read the book called Make It Stick. It's about this big. It's called Make It Stick, The Science of Effective Learning or something like that. And the 2 authors of that book literally dive deep into the research, and they explain how we can make it stick, how we can learn anything, whether it's for exams or for pilot school or for law school or whatever, how we can learn anything efficiently. And there's loads of stories in that book from students who weren't doing very well in class, and then they started incorporating some of these effective study techniques like active recall and spaced repetition, and then their marks magically got transformed just by changing the way that they studied. It wasn't that they needed to study harder or study more, which is often what we sort of implicitly understand. It was that they were just changing up the techniques that they were using, because really no one teaches us how to study. Like, it's not a thing that's taught in schools. And when I first came across this stuff in my second year of med school, like me and like all of my friends, we had our minds blown by this psychology lecture that we had about how to study for exams. Because we were thinking, why weren't we taught this stuff in like year 7 or year 8 when we were in middle school, whatever. So if you haven't read the book, Make It Stick, you should read it. We'll be drawing a lot from that book, using examples and using stories from there. I think if you're a student and you need to learn anything, that is the single best thing you can do with your time in the next week. Just like buy that book, Make It Stick, and read it. We'll put a link in the video description. It won't even be an affiliate link, or it might be an Amazon affiliate link. I don't know, whatever. We'll put a link in the video description. Get it on Kindle, get it in like physical copy, whatever you want. Just read the book, Make It Stick, because that will help all of your revision flourish. Okay, cool. So that's all my preaching about Make It Stick done. Thank you for signing up to this class. Let's now move on to the first section, which is step 1, understand. I'll see you there.